If you've ever started something with absolute certainty that this time would be different, only to watch yourself quit 3 weeks later, what I'm about to tell you will fundamentally change how you see yourself. I'm a psychologist, and I'm not here to make you feel better. I'm here to make you understand why your brain keeps sabotaging you and what you can actually do about it. You don't have a motivation problem. You have a design problem. And until you understand the architecture of how human drive actually works, you'll keep blaming yourself for a system that was rigged against you from the beginning. Let's start with something that's going to upset a lot of people in my field. Most psychologists won't tell you the truth about motivation because the truth doesn't sound therapeutic. It doesn't sound soft and affirming. It sounds harsh. It sounds like accountability. And in a culture that's terrified of making anyone feel uncomfortable, telling the truth has become a radical act. But I didn't become a psychologist to be popular. I became one to help people stop suffering from problems they don't understand. So here's the truth. You lose motivation after starting strong because you fundamentally misunderstand what motivation is and how it operates in the human brain. You think motivation is a feeling. It's not. You think it's something you're supposed to have before you act. It's not. And you think that when it disappears, it means something is wrong with you. It doesn't. Motivation is not fuel. It's exhaust. It's the byproduct of action, not the cause of it. And every time you wait to feel motivated before you move, you're waiting for something that only comes after you've already started moving. You've got the entire system backwards, and that's why you keep failing. Let me explain how this works neurologically, because once you see it, you can't unsee it, and that's when everything changes. Your brain operates on a reward prediction system. This isn't opinion, this is neuroscience. When you start something new, your brain makes a prediction about how rewarding that activity will be based on very limited information. At the beginning, everything is possibility. The business could make you rich. The workout program could transform your body. The creative project could make you famous. Your brain doesn't have evidence yet that it won't work, so it floods you with dopamine, the neurochemical of anticipation and desire. That flood of dopamine, that's what you call motivation. That's the fire you feel. That sense of invincibility, of clarity, of this is it, this is my moment. You feel it so strongly that you make a fundamental mistake. You believe it's about you. You think you've changed. You think you've finally become the person who follows through. You tell people about your plans. You buy the equipment. You make the vision board. You're absolutely certain this time is different because the feeling is so powerful. But here's what you don't know. That feeling has an expiration date built into it, and it has nothing to do with your character. As you continue with your new pursuit, your brain starts collecting data, real data, and here's where everything falls apart for most people. Your brain compares the actual rewards you're receiving to the predicted rewards it imagined at the beginning. And unless you're experiencing instant, massive, tangible success, which you won't be because nothing worthwhile works that way, your brain registers a prediction error. In neurological terms, a prediction error means your dopamine drops. And when your dopamine drops, that feeling you called motivation vanishes. Not because you're weak, not because you're undisciplined, but because your brain is functioning exactly as it evolved to function. It's withdrawing neurochemical resources from an investment that isn't paying off as quickly as predicted. This is why you lose motivation after starting strong. The strength of your start created an impossibly high prediction in your brain about what the rewards would be. And when reality, which is always slower, harder, and more mundane than fantasy, fails to meet that prediction, your brain pulls the plug. Now here's where it gets psychologically devastating. When that motivation disappears, you don't think, oh, my dopamine levels have normalized because my brain's reward prediction has been recalibrated. You think, I'm a quitter, I'm lazy, I don't have what it takes, there's something wrong with me. And that narrative, that story you tell yourself about your own inadequacy, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because now you're not just dealing with normal neurochemical adjustment, you're dealing with shame, with self-judgment, with the belief that you're fundamentally broken. And that belief creates real psychological barriers that have nothing to do with the original activity and everything to do with your identity. This is the cycle I see destroy people over and over again. They start strong, dopamine crashes, they interpret the crash as personal failure, they quit, they reinforce the belief that they're someone who doesn't finish things, and then that belief makes the next start even harder, because now they're carrying the weight of every previous failure. But here's what I need you to understand with absolute clarity. Every single one of those previous attempts wasn't a failure. It was your brain working normally. You weren't designed to sustain the emotional intensity of the beginning. No one is. That intensity is a neurological trick to get you to try new things that might be beneficial. It's not meant to last. It's meant to get you in the door. What happens after that, whether you stay or leave, depends entirely on whether you understand what comes next. So what does come next? Let me tell you what almost no one wants to hear. What comes next is that you have to act without the feeling. You have to move without the fire. You have to show up without the dopamine rush that made it easy at the beginning. This is where discipline enters the picture, not as a moral virtue, but as a psychological technology. Discipline is what you do when motivation is gone. It's the system you build to replace the feeling you no longer have. And here's where people in my field get squeamish. Because discipline sounds harsh. It sounds like punishment. It sounds like you're supposed to white-knuckle your way through misery, and that doesn't align with modern therapeutic culture that prioritizes comfort and self-compassion above all else. But I'm going to say something controversial. Self-compassion without standards is just self-indulgence with better branding. Real self-compassion means caring enough about your future self to do things your present self doesn't feel like doing. It means recognizing that feelings are real, but they're not reliable. It means understanding that waiting until you feel like doing something is a recipe for doing nothing. Let me address the critics directly here, because I know exactly what they're going to say. They're going to say I'm promoting toxic productivity, that I'm ignoring mental health, that I'm not accounting for depression, anxiety, ADHD, trauma, or the very real barriers that make action difficult for some people. And here's my response. I'm a psychologist. I work with all of those conditions every single day. I understand them intimately, and precisely because I understand them, I know that the worst thing you can do for someone struggling with motivation is to tell them that action requires feeling good first. Because if you have depression, you're never going to feel good enough to start. If you have anxiety, you're never going to feel calm enough to begin. If you're waiting for your brain chemistry to normalize before you take action, you're going to wait forever. The people who successfully manage mental health challenges are the people who learn to act despite how they feel, not because of it. They build tiny systems. They create external structures. They make action so small and so simple that it doesn't require an emotional state to execute. They don't wait for motivation. They engineer circumstances where motivation is irrelevant. This is what I mean by understanding the design problem. If you design your life around needing to feel motivated, you've designed yourself into a corner. Because feelings fluctuate, dopamine crashes, emotion is unreliable. But systems run regardless of how you feel. Let me give you the psychological framework that actually works, not the one that sounds good in a self-help seminar, but the one that holds up under research and real-world application. First, stop starting big. This is going to offend every motivational speaker who's built a career on go big or go home, but I don't care. Big starts create big predictions, which create big dopamine spikes, which create big crashes. You want sustainable change? Start so small it feels ridiculous. Start so small your brain can't generate a massive prediction error. Want to write a book? Start with one sentence. Want to get fit? Start with putting on your shoes. Want to build a business? Start with one phone call. The research is unambiguous on this. Small, consistent actions reshape your brain's reward prediction system over time. They teach your brain that this activity is rewarding, even if the rewards are tiny and incremental. And as your brain recalibrates its predictions to match reality, you stop needing those massive emotional highs to keep going. Second, separate identity from action. This is psychologically critical. Every time you say, I'm the kind of person who quits, or I'm just not disciplined, you're creating an identity narrative that your brain will work to confirm. Your brain seeks consistency with your self-concept. If you believe you're a quitter, your brain will find ways to make you quit because that maintains internal coherence. But here's the exploit. Your brain doesn't actually care what your identity is. It just wants consistency. So you can deliberately construct a new identity based on evidence you create through small actions. You don't start by believing you're disciplined. You start by doing one disciplined action, then another, then another. And eventually, your brain looks at the pattern of behavior and says, I guess we're someone who does this now. Identity follows action, not the other way around. Stop waiting to feel like the kind of person who follows through. Start acting like it in such small increments that your current identity can't resist. Third, understand the role of environment in motivation collapse. You cannot willpower your way through a poorly designed environment. I don't care how committed you are. If your environment is full of friction for the behavior you want and zero friction for the behavior you're trying to avoid, you will lose that battle. This isn't a character judgment, it's physics. If you want to work out but your gym is 30 minutes away and your couch is 5 feet away, your couch wins. If you want to eat healthy but your kitchen is full of processed food, the processed food wins. If you want to write but your phone is next to your laptop with 17 apps designed by teams of engineers to hijack your attention, your phone wins. People dramatically underestimate how much their environment controls their behavior, and they dramatically overestimate how much their willpower can overcome environmental design. Willpower is a finite resource. Environment is constant. Change your environment, and you change your defaults. And when you change your defaults, you don't need motivation anymore. Fourth, and this is where it gets legally and politically precise, you need to understand the difference between reasons and excuses, and you need to be ruthlessly honest with yourself about which one you're operating from. A reason is a legitimate barrier that requires problem solving. Depression is a reason. Chronic pain is a reason. Financial constraints are a reason. These are real obstacles that require real accommodation and often professional support. An excuse is a story you tell yourself to avoid discomfort. I'm not a morning person is an excuse. I don't have time is usually an excuse. I'll start on Monday is definitely an excuse. These are narratives that protect you from the vulnerability of trying and potentially failing. Here's the hard part. Only you know which one you're dealing with. And the people who succeed are the people who are honest enough with themselves to know the difference. They don't use reasons as excuses, and they don't dismiss excuses as reasons. They assess accurately, and they respond accordingly. If you're dealing with a reason, you get help. You modify the approach. You find accommodations. You work with reality, not against it. If you're dealing with an excuse, you name it as such, and you do the thing anyway. Not because you're supposed to be superhuman, but because you're honest enough to recognize when you're lying to yourself. And here's the most important thing I can tell you. The motivation will come back, but it comes back differently. It doesn't come back as that electric, euphoric, I'm going to change my whole life feeling you had at the beginning. It comes back as quiet satisfaction, as competence, as the small pleasure of seeing yourself keep a promise to yourself, as the evidence-based confidence that you're someone who does what they say they're going to do. That version of motivation is slower. It's less exciting. It doesn't make for good social media content, but it's real and it lasts because it's not based on prediction and possibility. It's based on proof and pattern. The people who think they've lost motivation forever are the people still chasing the feeling they had at the beginning. They're dopamine addicts looking for the next hit, the next start, the next big idea that will make them feel that incredible rush of potential. But the people who actually build lives they're proud of, they've made peace with the fact that most of the work happens in the absence of that feeling. They've accepted that consistency is boring, that discipline is repetitive, that real change doesn't feel like a revelation, it feels like Tuesday. So if you're someone who keeps starting and stopping, let me tell you exactly what to do. Stop starting, start continuing. Pick the smallest possible version of the thing you want to do. So small it's almost embarrassing, and do that version every day for 30 days. Not when you feel like it, not when you're inspired. Every day, regardless of how you feel, your brain will resist. It will tell you this is too small to matter. It will try to convince you to go bigger because bigger feels more significant. Ignore it. Your brain doesn't understand how behavior change works. It's still looking for that dopamine hit. After 30 days of small, consistent action, assess. Not how you feel, how you've acted. Did you do it? Yes or no? If yes, you've just reprogrammed your brain's reward prediction system. You've created evidence of reliability. You've built the foundation that motivation pretended to be. Then you can expand, slowly, carefully, always keeping the action smaller than the emotion, so your brain never gets ahead of reality. This is how you stop losing motivation after starting strong. You stop starting strong. You start starting small, and you build something real instead of something exciting. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. You wanted me to give you a technique to make the feeling come back, a hack to stay fired up, a way to keep that initial energy alive. But that would be lying to you. And I'm a psychologist. My job is truth, not comfort. The truth is, you're not broken. Your motivation isn't gone. You just finally understand what it actually is. And now you can build your life on something more solid than a feeling that was never meant to last. Now go do the smallest version of the thing you've been avoiding. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, now, and then do it again tomorrow, and the day after that. That's how you win.